Hello Toy Collector fans, Universal Toy Collector here and welcome to the channel. And welcome to another episode of My Collecting Life, the weekly series where I get to chat with you, members of the toy collecting community, about your own personal collections, finding out what got you into collecting in the first place and what gives you that toy collecting buzz. Okie dokie then, so it's another episode and another guest. And who is the guest on this week's episode, I hear you all ask? Well, why don't we all find out? Sit yourselves down, put your feet up and make yourselves comfortable. And let's take a look at some of his collection in a musical montage. Well then, how about that for a collection? Absolutely fantastic. A little bit of everything, and I'm really excited to chat to our next guest. Also, very nicely displayed, which reminds me, I need to get some damn lighting for my display cabinets. Anyhow, enough about me. Let's crack on with our guest. It's a pleasure to welcome to the channel for the first time, Grindhead Jim. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm so fucking excited because we've been after this for probably close to, if not over a year.
Yeah, absolutely. So because it was a while back, wasn't it, when I invited you? And I think the first time around, you were moving or you were doing something with your collection room.
Yeah. It was something where I didn't think it was. We needed to have a display in order to discuss. So it was like, all right, yeah. So the fact we finally got to do this is really, my whole month has been leading up to this, truly. So I'm really excited. I'm glad to be
really
here.
nice of you to say so. And I've got to say, what a display as well. And yeah, I love it. I just love it. Absolutely awesome. So understandably, like you said, you know a little bit about the chat. I've got 10 questions for you, all about you and your collection. Well, one of them's a slightly different subject, but we'll get to that. when we get to it. So if you're ready, sir, we'll crack on with the first question.
Let's go for it.
Awesome, man. What toy lines were you into as a kid, and what memories do you have of them?
Oh, goodness. I can't remember a time that there wasn't Star Wars toys in my house as a child.
Okay.
I was born literally the day before A New Hope was released.
Oh,
So
wow.
I literally have grown up with Star Wars the whole way through.
Yeah.
So I always had Star Wars stuff. I have very vivid memories of coming home from Return of the Jedi in the theater and grabbing my trusty, rather hastily taped together yellow lightsaber from the Empire the Strike Back days and just going out and just, you're extra excited. You're hyped up for the movie and stuff. So Star Wars was always a huge part of the collection. I had the Darth Vader case, and I would keep predominantly Star Wars characters in there, but I also had some of the 3 3/4 inch King Syndicate stuff. So like all the Filmation Flash Gordon stuff.
Okay.
And so I kept those in there as well. And that was probably one of the only toy lines I just kind of let mix in with Star Wars because I didn't have anything else. I loved world building, and I loved the world building of Star Wars with the vehicles and the play sets. And then that led into, of course, Masters of the Universe, which I was into right away from the start. Certainly G.I. Joe, Real American Hero. But the one that was by far the biggest in the early days for me was the Superpowers collection. Okay. Huge world building, lots of vehicles and play sets and great characters. That's probably my most prized toy line of my entire life for sure.
Wow.
Later on, Transformers came around. I have vivid memories of the year they came out and loving the cartoon and slowly getting into the toys. Got the comic books for my birthday that year. And then blink, the next thing I know, the movie had come out, the animated film, which I got to see in the theater. Yeah. And it remains to this day my favorite movie of all time.
The Transformers movie?
Yeah, because it for me, it was such a refreshing thing as a child that really had a vivid imagination to see that this thing I was watching on television could be expanded to that scope and spectacle. And the people that were writing it took it seriously. I didn't see all these characters dying as a cynical cash grab, although it was. I didn't see it that way. I saw it as this is a part of life. I'd already experienced death as a child. My grandfather died a few years before. Yeah. So it was something that I had already come to accept as a part of the life cycle, right? And for me, that movie hit very hard for the right reasons versus the wrong ones. Yeah. And that kind of marked like a shift in my toy collection as well. I got a couple toys after the movie, but the Transformers dropped off after that for me. Wasn't into the Headmasters or any of that nonsense. Then we started getting into what I call the second wave of American toys from like 85 on. So you get like your Air Raiders and Sky Commanders and Mask and, a bunch of other things that were great, but just didn't necessarily have a lot of longevity, long, in terms of like toy market. And, but I had a little bit of everything, and I have great memories playing with them and mixing and matching with friends and, Transformers, Superpower, Star Wars, really a lot of that stuff. Great play memories with that stuff.
What about Saturday morning watching then? Like, what was your influences like for like Master of the Universe and G.I. Joe? Was it the cartoons? Would they have a big influence, or did you actually see the toy line first and then thought, oh, I'll watch the cartoon, or was it the other way around?
A bit of both, because it was one of these things where, in the States anyway, the cartoons tended to come out more or less at the same time as the toy line, or very close. Masters of the Universe being the exception. I had seen that classic commercial on television, the one that was aimed at parents, where it's like, this is all new from Mattel. You put it together, da da da. And I just thought that was so cool. And for that first Christmas in '82, I think it was, got Grayskull and He-Man and a couple other characters. And it was a few months later that finally got a Skeletor. My grandmother bought it for me, which I thought was weird that she would actually get me this walking skeleton, but I was very happy. But Transformers, G.I. Joe as well, and certainly with like Super Friends and things like that. Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, all those were really big parts of my childhood, whether it was, afternoon watching and or Saturday morning. I used to get really pissed off when Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends would get preempted by American football. I always hated that. I was like, Dad, I want to watch Spider-Man. So that was like culturally, that was the biggest influence. And of course, I wanted the toys to tell my own stories up here. After the TV was off.
I find it interesting when you said about Transformers the movie. As a kid, you didn't see it as like a cash grab from the creators of Transformers. At that age, what kid would? I mean, looking back now, and you watching it again, can you see that's exactly what they were doing? Is like killing off the original G1 line to promote the new ones that were coming out?
I recognize that that's what the goal was.
Yeah.
But by accident, they told a very compelling grown-up story. I think that the stories that they had developed up to that point deserve that. And I think seasons 3 and 4 of the cartoon show, although a bit of a continuity mess, it was trying to tell more episodic, serialized stories to varying degrees of success, but they were trying to take it a step further. They didn't really succeed, but I recognized it for what it was at the time.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot like, when you play with your friends, sometimes you're reenacting an episode of the show and then you extend the story beyond that.
Absolutely. Yep.
I really did see it as a step up from what I'd been seeing on television for a couple of years leading up to that. And I applauded it. Of course, it was cool to hear Spike say shit and everything. And because it was like, what? They can get away with that? It's a PG movie. Of course they can get away with that.
I mean, it's interesting because, sorry, I was just going to say, it's interesting for me because I used to watch a lot of Transformers. I used to watch a lot of G.I. Joe and He-Man. And back in the day, I just thought they were absolutely fantastic. Loved everything about them. The thing is now, I can watch them now as an adult and I think, oh, that's a hard watch. I mean, does that take anything away from you, from your childhood memories? It's like, you're sitting there as an adult, why did I watch this as a kid? Or do you think I can see why I loved this as a kid and you still hold on dear to those memories?
I can understand why I enjoyed it as a child. I understand that when you're an adult writer and you're tasked with writing these stories for children, you're trying hard to tell a compelling story, but you don't want to lose your audience, right?
Yeah.
And so I recognize that in the stories that were told. Some stuff certainly more compelling than others. I would love to see someone go back and do a supercut of the first 2 series and see if you could make a longer form story that makes some sense. So you can tell the origin stories of everybody and kind of cut out all the fluff and see if there's something that could be made from that original material. But I also think that even as a kid, whether I realized it or not, I did recognize that the bar had been raised with that film and the storytelling. And I really appreciated that because by that point, I'm watching tons of movies. We had a video and everything. We were just going nuts watching stuff. So I was very familiar with adult storytelling. So I was appreciative that we finally got to that place. At least I thought we had with that film. And to a lesser degree with the G.I. Joe movie, I thought it was a step up in many ways from the cartoon. I still kind of say that the original G.I. Joe miniseries with the mass device was probably one of the best episode arcs of any cartoon series in the 80s. It's just a really cool story that has so many facets and everything has a setup and a payoff, whereas not all of them do. But it is interesting to me that because sometimes they come out of the gate guns blazing and then they're kind of like, oh, now we got to fill, 52 weeks a year, 5 days a week. What the fuck are we going to do? And then they have to, I get it. There's a problem with creating content on that level. And so I understand it. I just wish that quality was a bit more consistent across the board.
Where do you stand today with, because recently we've just had Masters of the Universe Revolution out. We've had Revelation. We had the Transformers War for Cybertron trilogy, which I thought was absolutely excellent. We've had G.I. Joe Resolute. We've had G.I. Joe Renegades. Where do you see the storytelling in today's modern G.I. Joe, Transformers, and Masters of the Universe compared to back then in the 80s?
Generally speaking, it's pretty good. I think that it's a thankless job, and I feel that nostalgia is killing creativity.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say this to preface my entire point in that if you want things to be like they were when you were a kid, buy the DV sets and watch them and just don't watch anything else. If that's really what you want, if that's what you think you want.
Yeah.
The fact is, with these newer things, they're trying to tell new stories with characters we love, which can be a very fragile balance. I liked Revelations more than most people did. I thought it was ballsy, if ham-fisted. But when the whole story arc was revealed, I'm like, okay, I see where you're going. I may not have liked all the twists and turns that you took to get there, but in the end, I think it was a good story. I just watched Revolutions this morning. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I was like, okay,
absolutely.
this fulfilled the promise of what we originally were going to get. But again, in hindsight, which is always 2020, I feel like you cannot get to the success of Revolution without the setup that was Revelations.
Absolutely.
So I feel like we as fans, as adult fans, get too caught up in the not my He-Man or whatever you want to say. But although these are, they want to give us enough to hook us in as the old guard fans, but they're not made for just us. They're trying to get new people to come in.
Yeah.
And there's certain aspects that you have to bring in to bring other people in, whatever you want to call those aspects. I'm not even going to get into that here, but I think that the storytelling is more often than not better than people seem to think it is.
Yeah.
With Resolute, things like that, I think it was, again, ballsy. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I think more often than not, they're good storytelling. And if you don't like it, that's okay. You don't have to. There's billions of things out there for you to watch. You can make all the headcanon that you want and be okay. But I think that it's not only on par, it's better than when we were kids in many ways, even if I don't necessarily like the story being told. I think the level of quality is up there. And it's not pandering or punching down to my intelligence, which I appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just interesting to hear you say that, really, because I get where you're coming from, where they're saying, oh, well, like you say, that's not my He-Man and stuff like that. I never listened to any, or I didn't hear any of the promise before Revelation was released. I just sat and watched it, so I didn't hear anything that had been said about it previous. I just knew it was coming. I sat and watched it, and I thought, yeah, okay, I enjoyed that. And then I started hearing things, well, this, that, and the other, and blah, blah, blah. There were certain elements of it that I didn't like, and I thought, okay, well, yeah, I can see why there's a fuss being made. On the whole, I didn't mind it. I loved the animation. I loved the look of it. Like I say, certain things I wasn't too keen on, but I feel that they turned that around and done a good job with Revolution. And I really did enjoy that. It was 5 parts, wasn't it? 5
Yeah,
parts.
and
Yeah,
they
5 parts.
managed, might even be 6, but they raised the stakes, which seems
Absolutely, yeah.
The first series it was pretty big, and they raised the scape and scope, and each time that they've done this so far with part 1 and 2, and then this, you have a different kind of end goal in mind story wise, and they've hit all those, and you get all the characters that you want to see. They get to be the characters that they are. I don't think anyone was acting out of character, really. You're letting characters evolve. You're letting them have arcs, and you're setting the stage for new stories to be told. So it's not just rehashing the same old crap. People loved Force Awakens when it first came out, by and large. But once it settles in, you're like, oh, it's a New Hope plus, which is fine. And I think that with all these different projects, if we were just getting that kind of treatment, people would be just as upset, but for a different reason. And I think that too often people are just ready to snap and say, this isn't what I want. Well, then just tell us what you really want. And you go write it. Like, that's what I don't understand. It's like,
The thing
you
is,
can't please anybody.
Do you think there's too much emphasis or too much being said about being inclusive, being woke, And is there too much expectation that is coming from us older generation fans of these certain IPs?
Short answer, yes, because times are different. It's been 40, 50 years at this point, okay? And if we don't, if we don't open up the lanes to let everyone share in this, these things that we love aren't going to live on. And if you want people to appreciate what came before, they have to have an entry point. If everything is about white men succeeding, it's not gonna last, because people have had it up to here who are seeing white dudes do well, including myself. It's like, okay, let's see something different. Now, again, can it be ham-fisted in the approach? Absolutely. And a lot of times it is, but there's not many other ways to get there. You kind of have, it's kind of like the old school, like, peanut butter makes the medicine go down or whatever.
Yeah. You're
not going to get to that place. And I think that the people complaining the most are the ones that are the least affected. It's like, again, we've had how many decades with these stories in this way? There's nothing wrong with opening it up. It opens up the possibilities of storytelling with new characters and more diversity. So you got to let people in. Have I seen updates that?
I was going to say, I feel it's our generation that are going to be the hardest to try and overcome. Once our generation is out of the way and done with, it would then move on to the next generation. They would have grown up with what we have now. So in years to come, it will just be a natural evolution of things to come. Anyhow, I don't want to go too deep into that. We'd crack on. And so what was your favorite toy line and why? Or did it change from, because I know you mentioned superpowers, but I mean, was that like throughout the whole of your childhood? Or did you have phases where it was like Star Wars, then He-Man, then G.I. Joe? Or was it just predominantly superpowers?
I think every toy line got its due, and I always went back to all of those toy lines throughout. But in terms of the impact and the lasting memories, superpowers is far and above everything else. And I think it comes down to presentation. One, I was a huge Super Friends fan from birth, because that's from a 70s show. And I loved every iteration of it. I really enjoyed watching those shows. And there was a severe lack of playable toys in the market. Yeah, there were Amigos, but by the time I was really getting into them, they weren't as easy to get, and there wasn't as wide a range of characters. So when Superpowers collection comes along, like, that's perfect for me. Like, wow, finally I can, have these and make my own stories. And, it's even in their marketing. You decide, what happens and stuff. Yeah. So I really enjoyed that. And then that first year they came out, the whole first series, you had the Hall of Justice, you had the 3 vehicles there, a nice set of villains, a nice set of heroes, but it wasn't a ridiculous amount. It was just enough to have a really good first showing. Yeah. So when I see toys now, like Wave 1 is like 4 figures, I'm like, come on, like, that's the model, I think. And that Christmas, my parents went out and bought everything they could find. I was short a Wonder Woman because you couldn't find her. And then I was short Brainiac because I couldn't find him. And I got those not too long, within a couple months. Okay. And they had it all laid out perfect. It was like Santa had come, and everything was a perfect, just like a store display almost. And it was like the most magical thing I had ever seen. And it is like the tent pole, the template from which I measure all other Christmases. And it was something that I never forgot. And I don't know that I did a great job of communicating it to my parents before they left me. My mother, I think I told her about, but I also told her, like, yeah, when you gave away my Superpowers collection without telling me you were going to do that, it really broke my heart. She's like, I wouldn't have done it if I'd have known. I'm like, you should have asked. But that toy line just meant so much to me, and still does. That's why it was the first thing I went after when it came time.
Christmas, did you know that you were getting the Superpowers, or was it a surprise?
Total surprise. I would always ask for stuff. Like, I was the kind of kid that would give them a big list, and at the time I still had a belief in Santa and everything. And spoiler, Santa's not real. Sorry, kids, but what I was always appreciative of whatever I got, because it would always be somewhat of a surprise, because you never know what you're going to get out of that. And in this particular case, like, my parents were very good at hiding stuff and everything. So I was never the kid to go looking.
Yeah.
There was one time, 85 or 86, mom came home with Christmas shopped toys, and I happened to see, all I saw was like a Lego logo. And I made it a point to try and forget that before Christmas.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until after we'd built the thing, I recognized, oh yeah, okay. But I didn't click for me at the time.
Yeah.
As far as like, oh, mom bought it. But I liked the surprise. They went to so much effort.
Yeah.
That it was important to me, especially in hindsight, that like, let them have their fun. I do the same thing now. My wife and I had Christmas. It's our first Christmas physically together in the same household. And I went out of my way to surprise the hell out of her with stuff. And she managed to surprise me. She asked for a list, and I gave her a list like I would with my parents. And then she went out of bounds and did something really cool and got me something I really wanted. And
awesome.
It was just, it reminded me of all those years ago, 40 years ago, of an excellent Christmas. So
wow. When did you stop playing with your toys, and when did you become a collector, or when did you realize you were becoming a collector?
I would say that transition probably occurred around the time that the second and third waves of the Ninja Turtles toys had come out. Because I was getting those, and I would still play and display and have some fun. But by that point, I was getting on into high school and stuff, and I still had a bunch. And I would go after specific toys, things like that. The Toy Biz lines came out from Marvel Superheroes, and I was very excited because, again, it was similar to Superpowers for me at that time, in that we didn't really have a good representation of Marvel characters. Secret Wars I had a bunch of, but I thought it was really a hit and a miss, swing and a miss rather. So I collected some of that stuff, the early McFarlane Spawn stuff. But at that point, where I was living with my folks, the room, there was no place to display toys properly.
Yeah.
And so they just kind of went in the closet. And I didn't really touch upon toys with any meaningful manner until 2021. Everything you see behind you, with the only exception being a Toy Biz Venom and a Toy Biz Spider-Man that I managed to hang on to from those days, everything is new acquisition from 2021 to now.
So what got you back into that then? Because obviously you went a long time then without having toys apart from your two that you kept from your childhood. So what was it that got you back into the collecting? Or
it was two things. I've always collected physical media, be it music, film, or video games. And some of my very good friends here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area are known as the Game Chasers on YouTube, and we all collect video games. And they were throwing a toy show here. It was, it's down the street. And they said, "You want to come down?" Sure, I'll come down. And I just kind of went around, and I was starting to go like, oh man, this is really cool. And I bought like one or two things, like three things. I bought like a import Japanese chibi Godzilla stuff, and I bought like two NECA horror figures, and it was just these are nice to have, but there wasn't the intent that this was the start of something. It was more just to support people I knew that were running booths of that thing, and also just, this is cool. Fast forward, and that was January of 2020. Fast forward to, May, June of 2021, I was going to do a commentary track with my buddy for Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I was doing some research to refresh my memory on some of the behind the scenes stuff. And I just so happened to come across a video that in brief passing mentions the toys, which sparked a memory I had of seeing them in the flesh for the first time as a kid, not being able to get them at the time. Huge regret. And then it pointed over to Retro Blasting's channel. I go over there, watch his Indiana Jones stuff, and then I just binge it. And I'm like, I want to feel like that. I want to reclaim these representations of childhood. Then Iconicon hits in 2021, and I just dove in to all the chats, got to know people, soaked in the information, learned as much as I could about collecting and toys. And I actually bought my first with the intent to collect toys during Iconicon from Reclaimers Vintage. I bought a
Wow.
Superpowers Lex Luthor, and a Steppenwolf. And then from there, that's been it.
The rest is history. That is awesome, man. I mean, you've done quite well in that short space of time because your collection is immense. I've got to say, I've been looking for your pictures and stuff like that, and I'm just like, wow, and it's so many lines as well, which leads me into my next question. What do you currently collect, and do you have a certain focus?
Yes. And just as an addendum, what these pictures don't show and I should have sent was when you open this walk-in closet that's in this room, the first thing you'll see is 7 stacked bins of bagged loose figures.
Oh, good Lord. Wow.
Yeah. So like I have every Motu Origins figure that has been made for retail. And I have most of the Mattel Creation stuff as well. Wow. So the original idea was get Superpowers collection. I have everything from series 1 and 2, a couple from series 3. I might complete it later, but I just really wanted series 2. I've got them all. I'm super happy. Motu Origins was something I wanted from the ground up. So that's been something I've been after.
Great line.
And absolutely. And I said, I want to be retail complete. And now that the new old Motu Origins is no longer going to be retail except for reissues, I've technically completed that goal. So I'm waiting with bated breath to see where Mattel Creations goes, and we'll probably get most of that as well. But it's a nice breathing space for that right now. Marvel Legends was the other one that I wanted right away because I wanted those Marvel Comics representations. That's where it started. Then G.I. Joe Classified comes in. Then Action Force comes in. Then, and then Indiana Jones stuff. And then I start getting the hair up my ass to start getting 3 3/4 inch Star Wars again. I've got a very focused Black Series collection of just Bespin centric figures, basically for Black Series. And then most of what I have for the 3 3/4 is also Bespin centric because I was at one point going to entertain the idea of getting that Cloud City playset. I still might, but the idea was, okay, I'm going to go into that. So I think I have a little bit of everything that I want. Yeah. And then just when I think I've got a handle on, okay, now I just have to fill holes and restore things. Then something like a care package comes along where I got, I had gotten all the reissued Real Ghostbusters figures. Yeah. So I really had an affinity for those as a kid. Then my buddy Billy Wifta sent me the Firehouse, which I restored. And I love that thing to death. Yeah. And now they're doing wave 2. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to get more of those now. And then he sends me the remnants of a Real American Hero G.I. Joe base, a bunch of vintage figures. And then more people were sending me shells of stuff like Joey Ricondo and stuff. So every time it's kind of like the Godfather Part 3. Just when I think I'm out, they pull me back in. So it's always moving forward.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Always.
You mentioned the word complete with your Origins line. Would you class yourself as a completist when it comes to getting lines, or you just quite happy getting certain ones that you like, certain figures you like, or certain vehicles you like?
Generally, at this point, with the majority of toy lines, I've always been a cherry picker. So like with Action Force, I focus on the marquee characters. I have very few troops. I want those main characters in the line. Same thing goes for Classifieds. I'm very cherry picky with those, though. Yeah. In recent years, they've gotten really cool characters coming out, but I'm still kind of picking and choosing.
Yeah.
Jurassic Park, for example, you can see the 2 of my Mega Colossals down there. Very picky with those. I don't want any of the human figures from that line. I don't care. So it's something where very picky and choosy with the classic reissues of like the Playmates Ninja Turtles. I'm really going after what I had as a kid, plus the few that eluded me. When I have those, I'm going to be pretty happy with that. Yeah. And I'm maybe 4 or 5 figures away from that. But
wow.
So, but generally speaking, I'm very much a picky and chooser, but my version of picking and choosing is big. There's a lot of things that I want.
Yeah. That's the problem.
So I would say I'm closer to the end on all these toy lines than I am the beginning. Most of the way for most stuff.
And where do you stand with vintage toy lines and the modern day representation of those toy lines today? Are you a vintage person through and through, or are you happy with the modern day versions and what they're throwing out to us?
Neither.
Okay.
I'm going after the best representation of the character for me. So
Right.
if that means going back and getting something vintage, I will do
Yeah.
that. If it means doing a reissue, I will do that. If it means getting reproduction, I'll get that.
Yeah.
I don't have any, I'm not married to any of it. So I go after what works. And a great example, my Star Wars shelf one of my Star Wars shelves anyway.
Yeah.
Those are all Power of the Force 2 vehicles. I think that's the
Okay.
best version of the Star Wars vehicles that have ever existed, in my humble opinion, because you've got the old mold with better paint deco,
Yeah.
and the price is right. And then behind it, you've got a bunch of vintage collection Star Wars characters, which I think they're not the best figures in the world, but I think they're a lot better than, 5 POA that don't look like the characters either. So when people were like, "Oh, that sculpt doesn't look like Han Solo," I'm like, neither did the original, so I don't want to hear it. So but that's for me. So I just go after what works best for me in the moment. I will mix and match if the scales. I don't give a shit. So I might have a vintage G.I. Joe figure that I love and then go for an anniversary one that works well. And I mix and match until I'm happy, man.
Does that matter to you with regards to the figures not looking like their on-screen representations? I mean, look, you said it yourself. The Kenner lines back in the day, they didn't really look like Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, or Mark Hamill. Did that bother you as a kid? If it didn't bother you as a kid, why would you say it bothers people these days that they didn't look like that?
I think that, your memory has a certain coating of sugar or rose-colored glasses, whatever you want to call it. I remember very distinctly watching Empire Strikes Back as a kid on video and going like, well, first of all, his outfit's gray, not brown, and his hair is brown, not blonde. I don't get it, but this is him. Okay, but my attitude
you knew who it was as a kid.
Exactly. I knew enough. But my attitude then is as it is now. I would rather have something that's slightly inaccurate than have no opportunity at all. So in this day and age, I have options. I go after what I want, and I don't apologize for that, nor do I ask anyone else to apologize for what their wants and needs are. But I don't understand the people that seem to only want the true vintage this or that. I had a friend of mine come in, and I'm not going to name his name because I'm not trying to embarrass him, but because I understood his standpoint. Like, I understood where it came from, but I was like, dude, still. I was so proud to show him my Millennium Falcon, my Slave One, and my X-Wing, because I got them all in the same week, and I was vibrating. I was so happy. And he's like, oh, you got the Power of the Force ones. It's not the original. They're nice, but they're not the original. And I'm thinking to myself, the original Millennium Falcon was a white hunk of plastic with no detail and no character at all. This is the exact same mold with better paint.
Yeah.
Why punch down like that? I don't understand that. It's like, he who dies with the most toys is still dead. Number one. And two, the quality, it's subjective. So, like, I don't dismiss his opinion. I just kind of go like, can you not also have empathy for what I'm going for? Because I want any motherfucker to walk in this room, see that and go, damn, that's the Millennium Falcon. Because I feel that's the reaction one should have. I collect for myself, but I love sharing everything I collect. Because I know that there's people that I come across that aren't going to put in the effort, and they just melt and turn into a child when they see this stuff. And that's the best part of collecting, is to be able to remind someone of something or introduce them to something that they wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to do so. I don't understand this act of hoarding just for themselves and like, don't touch it. Like, no, touch it, pick it up. Like, I had someone like look at me like really horrified when I told them that they could pick up my Millennium Falcon and play with it. I'm like, play with it. It wasn't that expensive. If you break it, I can buy or print the parts. It's fine. Just play with it. Have fun.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, I've always gone by the saying, there's no right way to collect. There's no wrong way to collect. It's all about personal preference. Whatever makes you happy at the end of the day. Look, listen, there are things that you might collect or someone else might collect that I think, well, I'm not really interested in that line. But listen, hey, it's great you do. You know, I don't have any problem with that. And it's the same with purists. I can get the reason behind why they want it to be pure vintage Kenner or pure O-ring G.I. Joe. I get that. I don't have an issue with that. Listen, my preference would be to complete the 96 original Kenner Star Wars figures. You know, I think about 8 or 9 figures out, but Jesus, those figures are damn expensive now, especially the last 17. And I'm thinking, I can't justify spending that kind of money on those figures. So for the time being, I'm quite happy to get Stan Solo, or do you know what I mean? Just to fill those gaps for the time being. And if you look at those figures from a distance, you wouldn't know the difference.
You can't tell.
You know, from a distance. And listen, I'm not precious like that. But listen, I know people that are adamant that they want them to be. I get that. I respect that. Not a problem at all.
Yeah, and I respect it because, again, it's a personal choice.
Yeah.
But when that bleeds over into somehow inferring that someone else's collection that isn't that strict is somehow lesser, I think is a step too far.
Well, listen, I don't agree with that, what you've just said. I don't agree with that person thinking that, is what I'm saying.
Right.
I don't collect for monetary value.
Me either.
I don't collect for monetary value. I don't listen. If it's worth anything when I'm dead, I'm not going to benefit from it. I'm gone.
Right.
Someone else might. You know, my kids might. Georgie might. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
I don't have any say over it. I'm gone. I don't have any control over it. What I do have control over is what I collect, what I like, and what I want to add to the collection. And that's all that matters to me. I'm not going to listen. If I did need to sell stuff off, I would sell it off. I would say to the guy, whoever buys my Star Wars vintage, look, that's a repro, that's a Stan Solo. It's not original, but listen, I'm not going to charge you that original price. Have it for this or whatever. Do you know what I mean? I don't collect for monetary value. I collect for the enjoyment of collecting. And if anybody has the attitude of, well, your collection is as worth as much as mine because it's this, that, and the other, I don't go down that. I don't agree with that. That's wrong. And shouldn't be thinking like that.
I think with the current, I agree, and with the current state of the collecting culture, okay, I do a couple conventions a year. I'm a mainstay at Retropalooza. I usually share a table or have my own table. And in the last couple of years, I've taken to selling toys. When I have extras or I have friends that routinely just send me stuff to sell because I don't want to be bothered with eBay, and they know that I can offload stuff for them. Yeah. And they give me pricing guidelines, and I always make sure they make a decent amount of money. But I never gouge anybody. You know, I had a Motu Origins snake face that I accidentally bought 2 of them, and I brought one. It's not the easiest figure to get a hold of. It wasn't when it came out, and it's certainly not that easy to get now, at least in the States. And someone came over, was like, "Dude, I've been looking for this everywhere. What do you want on it?" I'm like, "Well, how much did it go for in the store?" He's like, $20. I'm like, "Well, that's how much I want." He's like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's it." Wow. He's like, "You're not going to mark it up?" I'm like, "No, I don't need it. You do. So give me $20 and take it." And he took it, and he was just like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yeah, I mean that." Yeah. You know, there's other stuff I have that, valued up considerably, and I still try to make sure that you're getting something it's worth your while as a seller.
Absolutely.
Especially if it's somebody else's stuff. With mine, I'll wheel and deal all day because I'm bringing it here because I want someone else to enjoy it. And I think a lot of people that sell secondhand or resell, or whatever term you want to use, even if it's not a primary business for them, if it's a primary business, it's a bit different. But when you're doing it as a hobbyist, I don't understand why one feels the need to get such a high return on their investment instead of prioritizing sharing that joy with somebody else. I realize that I'm a vocal minority in this regard, but I believe in passing things forward, you know, because I've been blessed a lot in life, especially in the last several years. The toy collecting community has really lifted me up spiritually. I feel, I know it's cheesy to say. So when I have the opportunity to finally give back, I'm going to do it. I'll leap at that chance. I'll slip and fall because I'm fat, but you get my point. I think it's important that we remember
absolutely
what the word community means.
Yeah.
And I think all too often people just get so bitter and jaded about other things in their life that they then project that onto this hobby that should be making you smile.
Well, listen, it's a hobby. It's about fun. For those of you watching, we're just coming up to question 5. So I do believe that this might just run a little bit over the hour, but it's all good. It's all good. Don't worry about that. It's fine. You carry on watching. We're having a great time here. Right. Question number 5.
Yeah.
Do you have a sentimental or prized piece within your collection?
Many, in fact. I would say the number 1 is my 100% complete Hall of Justice. I got a great deal on the original version that I got. It was nearly complete. And I got it directly. It was off eBay, but it was from somebody who he had it his whole life, and he priced it very, very reasonably. It was probably the best packaging I've ever seen in a shipping container. And to have that was beautiful. And I spent the next few months painstakingly getting the few little pieces I needed to get. And when I got the last piece, which is the most ridiculously hard to find piece, which is like a piece of cardboard that goes underneath one thing, it was like epoch making for me. It was amazing. And because it has such a tight representation to my parents, that was important to me. It was the first of many holy grails. And then I have like 2 other things. I have many, 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 many things that are important to me, but I'll just do a couple more. I have Amigo, Spider-Man, and Captain America over here.
Okay.
That were gifts from Jim Salzberg. These were from his childhood collection, him and his twin brother, who unfortunately is no longer with us.
Okay.
And he gave those over to me because he knew that I would appreciate it. And they have a very prominent place on the shelf. They're very important to me. Yeah. I have this Mezco 112 Spidey. It's in the box that Jim Largo sent, which was crazy. So it's like a huge Spidey fan. So, of course, that was really, really great.
Yeah.
And then I forgot where I was going with this, but probably I know which one. I have many Godzillas that have sentimental value, but the one that I have the most sentimental value for, tripping over my words here, it's about this big Godzilla. It was just a cheap knockoff rubber cast one that we found on the side of the road.
Oh wow!
At a not like trash, but like at a rest stop.
Yeah.
Wife and I are driving here from Oregon when we moved her here. We go to this rest area, convenience stop, whatever you want to call it, and they had them, and they're clearly bootleg, and they're charging like $50 US for them. And I was like, ugh. For 20, I'd have considered it, but it was cool to see. So I went in first. I do whatever I'm doing. I come back in. She goes in the store because we have watched the dog, and she goes in, comes out, gives me the Godzilla, and picked the best colored one. She picked the right paint job because they all had different colors and shit.
Okay, yep.
And it's cheesy. It's not fully accurate, but the fact that she was so thoughtful to get that meant a lot. And it's very prominently displayed. I see it every time I'm in the living room, so that means a lot to me too. But everything has a meaning. I have a philosophy with all of my collections. It's very simple. Yeah. If you point to something on my shelf and I can't tell you why I have it on that shelf, it shouldn't be there.
I like that. That's perfect. I like that. That is awesome. That is awesome. What about a grail piece? Is there a grail piece that you wouldn't mind in your collection? And when I say grail piece, I've said it loads of times before. I don't mean the most expensive thing ever. It could be something that you saw in a store 4 or 5 weeks ago and you think, I'm not going to pick it up. Now I'll go back. You go back and it's gone and you've not seen it since. Anything like that at all?
A handful. So I would say that a decent scaled Unicron has eluded me for a while. I have ordered a third-party Unicron, and we'll see if it actually arrives, number one. And if it does, that'll be like, check. Because that was like a far-flung, there's no way I'm ever going to get this dream when I first started this. Like, I knew it wasn't going to happen. And then now I'm at this place where it could happen. So super cool. The next one would be Eternia. I missed out on the Mattel Creations Eternia. Did not have the right amount of money at the right time to get it. It was a hard month for me. And I just barely missed out on it. And I'm tempted to go after it, even at reseller prices, because I want one so badly. But if one fell out of the sky, I'd be a really happy guy. I was talking specifically about the Origins one. I couldn't give less of a shit about the vintage one. But the current version that they did, I think, is really cool. It was overpriced. I've said my piece on that, but I still want one in spite of that. And then if someone came along with a complete Well of Souls from Raiders of the Lost Ark, I'd be a really happy guy. That is definitely something that got away, because I remember seeing one in a Toys R Us in 1985 on clearance for like $5. And the reason I didn't ask for it was because I couldn't find an Indiana Jones figure to go with it. If I'd have been able to get an Indiana Jones figure and that, I'd have walked out of there with them. But imagine how much more heartache I would have when my parents gave that away years later. You could finance an education for one of those, you know.
Wow. That's crazy stuff. There's some pretty cool Grail pieces, I've got to say. Pretty cool Grail pieces. Just moving on from toys, not only are you a big toy collector and a big toy fan, you're also a big fan of music and have been involved with music. How did that come about?
They all kind of came together at the same time, believe it or not. So 84 was the year that I got the Superpowers collection stuff, and it was kind of the height of toys for me. And then 85, I'm still getting things like Voltron and, you know, other Transformers, Dinobots, whatever. But that Christmas of 85, the big gift was my first, you know, tabletop stereo. I had a Walkman tape deck at that point. And when I got that, that was the crossover for me. I'd gotten a few records there. The first cassette tape I ever got, which I still have that cassette, the original, is Tears for Fears Songs from the Big Chair. Still one of my favorite albums of all time. And then that quickly turned into becoming a huge Queen fan, because I was a Queen fan and didn't even realize it. I heard their songs and didn't know it was them. I set out to get their whole discography. Metallica hit really quickly for me at that point. It just spiraled all through the mid to late 80s. And, you know, before you know it, I'm listening to like Napalm Death and Carcass and Morbid Angel, and it just steamrolled forever. And then when one has the creative mind, sometimes when you listen to music and you're inspired by it, you want to make your own. I decided that I wanted to be a drummer, and it just slowly built up. First, I had a practice pad with sticks, and before I knew it, we had moved where my parents retired. My dad found a good excuse to get me a beat up drum set, and we together completely refurbished it from the ground up. And then I had my first couple of bands, and I joined the Marine Corps. And then based on my success there, I was able to buy my first really big drum kit. I still have that drum kit. Moved to Chicago after I got out of the Marines, and just got lucky with the right band, and did that band for 5 or 6 years, and put out some good records that are getting vinyl reissues to this day. So I'm very pleased with all of that. And it's a very condensed version of the story, of course, but it just kind of happened. There was always music in the house when I was a kid. My parents, although they were apprehensive of some of the subject matter, they were always very encouraging of me to explore, as long as I kept my both feet firmly planted on the ground.
I find it interesting that you went for the drums, because I don't think people realize the drums hold the band together. If they go too slow, it slows the song down. If they go too fast, it speeds the song up. So the drums, they've got to get it on point. They've got to be on the beat, and they've got to lead it really from, you know, from a band point of view. What was it about the drums then? I mean, back in the day, I mean, I've got about as much musical talent as I don't know what. I haven't got any musical talent when it comes to instruments. But I was always interested in the guitar. I mean, I love the guitar, whether it be bass guitar or electric guitar. And I wouldn't have minded learning to play the piano, because I think you can do some super stuff on the piano. And if you know the keyboard, if you know the piano, then you can go on the keyboards and stuff like that.
Right.
So what was it then about the drums that got you playing the drums?
Well, I had dabbled in a keyboard, and I kept the same keyboard from that same year for a long time. I had like a toy drum from the time I was a little tiny boy, and I was always just kind of, you know, tapping on something. My dad had a set of bongos that he would play on, so I think it was kind of in my blood, so to speak. But what The inspiration, I suppose, is the fact that, yeah, the drummer leads the band to a certain degree, but also can provide the greatest textures. So as a drummer, when you hear a guitar riff for the first time and you're meant to write a part for it, there's about a billion different things that you could do within that time signature that's going to accentuate that part. And one of the things that I prided myself on, and something that I always wanted to do, was to be able to find every little nook and cranny. If you look at like an English muffin, right? I wanted to be the melted butter that filled everything up to where it was just perfect. And every bite was just that gooey, crunchy awesomeness. That was what I wanted to make every song that I had a hand in writing or playing, whether it was a cover or an original. So for me, that opportunity to create those moments that you're like, oh, where the riff stands out that much more, that has that much more grit, that much more groove, made it that much more beautiful, lets the guitars and the bass or the vocals shine. It's not just a showcase for your technical talent, but just to service the tune. I think that the ability for a drummer to do that, the opportunity is there more so than any other instrument, I think, in a group. And I think that's what attracted me to it.
Awesome. And I didn't realize you did your own writing as well.
Yeah, I actually have I have an entire record that I'm sitting on, and I'm going to be releasing it hopefully sometime in the next couple of years. I just need to get the right group of people together to reinterpret the riffs and produce it the way I know it can sound. Not quite there yet, but the riffs are there. I've got an album and a half's worth of material. I'm just waiting for the right opportunity to do it. What
about vocals? You into vocals or not really?
Oh, yeah. I've been doing vocals for
man of all talents. Awesome stuff.
Well, I've been doing the gruff, like death metal kind of growl vocals for 30 years at this point. And I've got the whole range. You got your highs, your mids, your lows, everything in between. I can do a lot of stuff. I'm not one of the best out there, but it's a good meat and potatoes sound. I can hum with the rest of them, but I would never lay down a melodic vocal track. Like, I'd get laughed out of town. But I really appreciate all of those different ways of interpreting the vocal, the vocal instrument. But oftentimes I was doing vocals because no one else could. So but doing vocals and drums at the same time, that's fun. But it's something that by necessity I had to learn how to do, and I did it a lot. And then it became, when I had the rare opportunity to do vocals just for its own sake, I had a blast. So I've always enjoyed it. I've
got to say, I mean, when I was younger, well, I'm not exactly old, but when, a few years ago, I had the opportunity to join a band. A friend of mine was the lead singer. He was stepping down. They wanted to get someone else in. So I auditioned, and listen, on a good day, I can knock out any one of those songs. Not an issue. When you're doing that and you've got a gig on a Friday night or a Saturday night and then a Sunday night, 3 nights on the trot, your throat starts to feel like it's been rubbed with sandpaper. It was rough as a box of frogs. And I've got to say, I enjoyed the audition, but by the end of it, I was like really hoarse. And I mean, listen, we're singing songs like from Foo Fighters and AC/DC and stuff like that. And listen, my voice, like I say, I can sing these songs once, but when you're doing it over and over again in rehearsal, then you've got another 8 or 9 songs on top of that for a set list. I just said, look, I'm going to be honest with you. I can't physically do this. My voice isn't strong enough, and I'm going to end up screwing my voice up. So I just said, look, I appreciate that. I don't want to let you guys down, because they say a good singer can make a fairly average band sound really good.
Yes.
A shit singer can make a decent band sound awful. And I didn't want to be that person.
Well, the physical aspect of it, especially with vocalists, gets overlooked way too much.
Yeah.
And it's like any other skill that requires the use of your body. You have to condition your body to be able to do it for longer periods of time. Right?
Absolutely.
When I was first writing some of those tunes with, like, say, Cardiac, I was pushing myself as hard as I could. I was writing parts I couldn't play, knowing that by the time we did do them live or in the studio, they'd be up to snuff. But the first
Yeah.
dozen run throughs, it's like, I can't do this. Like my hips felt like they were falling off and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think over time, as one practices and learns how to take care of whatever instrument aspects you're doing, it gets better. Because I think that's the difference between ability and endurance. And I think a lot of people have great abilities, but they need to learn the endurance factor.
Yeah.
So I think I think it squashes a lot of people's musical hobby sooner than it should be, because no one took them aside and said, well, here's what you do to get the endurance up. So
me and Georgie, we did a show in 2015 up at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and it was Rent, and it was a rock opera. And so we'd done it, I think 2012, and that's where we met, doing this show Rent. And I think we did eight performances, and it was heavy going. It's an emotional show. Like I say, it's a rock opera, so the songs are quite heavy in it. I played the part of Roger, and he had some fantastic songs. And so after 8 shows, I thought, okay, not a problem. We went up to the Edinburgh Fringe, and I think we did. We were there for 2 weeks. I think we did 14 shows in a row, and it was heavy going. And we were up at 10 o'clock at night. That was when we started, and I had people that had come in to kind of technically advise me on how to use my voice and stuff like that. And listen, I'll hold my hands up. I was like, look, I've done this show before. I know what I'm doing, and blah, blah, blah. By the end of that 2 weeks, my throat was absolutely buggered. And so one of the songs, it was a real high note. I couldn't get there. And it was in a duet. So I just stopped singing, let her do the high note on her own. And then I joined in after that. And I just said, look, I'm so sorry. And I've not really done anything singing wise since then. But I think technically wise, if I start thinking about things, that's where I start worrying about things. And whereas it's like when I play football, I never used to think about it. I used to do it. Then when they start getting into the technical side of things with the football or the singing, I start to overthink and then shit a brick and then end up ballsing up and then losing confidence. If I'm confident, then it's not an issue. But it's that confidence. When I lose it, it's gone. That's it. It's a real pain in the ass to get it back.
I struggled with that right up until the end of my active drumming career, right? And it was something where at one point I just had to say to myself in the mirror, you're in the best shape physically you've ever been in as a drummer. You wrote these parts to really knock the socks off of people. This is going to be your last record probably with this band, if not ever. You know how to do it. Your body is capable. Just go in and do it. Yeah. And it was simultaneously the hardest session and the easiest session at the same time. Was getting out of my own way. It was very difficult to get out of my own way. And I wouldn't say there's a secret to it. It was the right set of circumstances, and I just happened to pull it off. Although I pulled it off so well, that entire record is about 5 to 10 beats per minute too fast. And the percussion and the tempos on that record are musically irresponsible. Because you take something that's hyper fast to begin with, play it at a speed faster it's supposed to go, then generally speaking, because you're trying to hit that mark live, your adrenaline kicks in and then you go even faster. And I remember one of the guitar players saying, don't ever play this faster than the record because we can't play it that fast. It can't. Yeah. And I was like, I barely can play it, so I understand your point. And then we parted ways because of circumstance, and the drummer that we mutually groomed to take over had his work cut out for him playing those tunes. And he, from my understanding, cursed me a little bit on those songs in particular because they're pretty crazy. But it's great to be able to look back on a performance and say, despite all the odds, I did it. But you're always going to be your own worst critic, no matter what.
Oh, good.
And it's even harder when it's in the moment and you're like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. Sometimes you just have to say, I know how to do this. I've done it before. I'm just going to do it again. And it's a practiced skill.
Yeah.
that only works about half
Absolutely.
the time, but you got to try.
Well, listen, to say that I've not done anything I've not sung properly, I would say since 2015. I've been down, like with pub and done karaoke and stuff like that.
Sure.
But what I will say is I have done something just recently, and you will find out about that in mid-February. So I will say no more on that. It's been awesome talking music about with you. So what we'll do now is we'll move back onto the toy side of things.
Sure.
I've got 3 questions left. We come to the top of the hour. I'm just having a great time here, so I'm not gonna rush this. What was the reason behind you starting a channel, and did you have any influences?
Well, I've been doing YouTube since mid to late 2006. And the reason I started that first channel was just for the sake of doing drumming stuff. At first, it was to upload stuff of the band, and then also because I was involved with the drumming community pretty heavily. Sometimes people were like, well, what do you mean about this blasting technique or this snare technique that you're doing? And I'd say, well, let me make a quick video and upload it, and I'll show you. And it turned out that there was a market for that. So I went on and did a bunch of drumming stuff and uploaded a bunch of stuff from the bands that I was in. And then I kind of let that fall by the wayside for about a year. And then I started another channel to do like movie reviews and like that kind of a not angry style, but in a similar structure to what like Angry Video Game Nerd or Nostalgia Critic were doing at the time, but with my own spin on it, so to speak. And that was doing very well for a while. I really enjoyed it. And then probably it was definitely 2013. I said, okay, I'm going to kind of reset things. I'm going to focus more on the video game side of things because I've been doing a podcast with some friends that they started, really enjoyed talking about it. So I said, well, I'm going to do a new channel for that. And I didn't really have any influences for that. That was, I wanted to strip it down because what I found out was that I could take a video that I had worked 19 to 25 hours on, 17 of which were in the edit. These 20 to 30 minute long, really deep dives into these films and making jokes and making sure the edit had the right flow and the right pacing. And they would get views. But then I had another series where I would do like a 1 minute rant into the camera when the edit took 10 minutes, and that would get more views. So I decided when it came to the gaming stuff, let's just strip it down. Let's go full punk. And I put a tablet down and I looked into it and I spoke. And for the first several months, that was all of my videos, and they were getting some traction. So I said, okay, maybe I've been overdoing this. And then that led to live streaming with the video game thing with some supplemental videos in between. And the streaming became the thing. And then when it comes back around to toys, I just rebranded the channel right after I started collecting. And I did things the way that I knew how to do them, but I had to make some adjustments. Yeah, because the way that I was making videos before weren't compatible with toys. So like you don't want to film one of those in front of a green screen because if the toy's green, now it disappears. Like, all right, we'll have to do something else. So that necessitated just flipping my screen to the blue side, which was a pure accident. It was just solving a problem to where I had like a stark background. I could do that. And people fell in love with the blue. So as far as influences on that, I mean, obviously retro blasting analog toys and Pixel Dan or so, like I know Dan and I've been watching his videos for a while, and then Michael and Tony, of course, having their own similar styles. And of course I pull things from them. You always have to look at what works and say, okay, let me try my version of this. But that's really where it started for me. And I kind of got to the realization recently that there's more I can talk about in different ways to do it and to kind of break the mold on what I'd been doing.
Yeah, I think I watched your video. I think it's that with the title, I Can't Do This.
Yeah. Little clickbaity, that one.
Huh?
A little clickbaity, that one. Yeah. And it worked. People are watching it, which makes me very happy. And the support has been immense. Yeah. Because even as I'm going over my history on YouTube, which spans a long time, it's like, why am I listening to all of the experts and pundits that you have to hyper focus on one thing to be successful. If there's one thing that I've heard over the years, whether it was drumming, video gaming, movie reviews, streaming, toys, anything I'm talking about, the one thing that everyone that enjoys any of those phases of my career, it's not that they're coming because of the subject matter, that they enjoy hearing my perspective on it, which is humbling to say the least.
Yeah.
But if you hear that enough, it's like, well, there's got to be some truth to it. They can't all be blowing smoke up my ass. So, and I do enjoy sharing my opinions. I enjoy putting questions out into the world by means of the spoken word.
Yeah.
And if I've done it for this, 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 why not just open the floodgates and see what happens? So I'm always going to be cognizant and aware of what I've done in the past and what others have done, but I'm doing my best not to like go after a certain goal of what this should be. Like each video, each project is going to be what I want it to be, and then that's that. And try not to be too formulaic. It's difficult. We'll see. I don't know. Maybe it'll flop. I don't know. But that's kind of the goal.
Yeah. I mean, as a content creator, how difficult do you find it coming up with content, or does it just come quite naturally to you?
It depends upon the day, honestly. There are times when I'm like, I have a weekly show and I'm like, what the fuck am I going to talk about? And more often than not, and I'm just going to pull the curtain back here, in the last year, with very few exceptions, I didn't come up with the topic for what I was going to talk about until that morning when I had to put out the social media post.
Wow.
I make the title card and go, this. And then I put the title card up, I create the stream, and then I have the rest of the day to think about how I'm going to approach it.
Yeah.
And it's almost always by the skin of my teeth. I don't script a lot of stuff as I had in the past. I've learned that with live streaming, that you come with an idea, you let the discussion flow naturally, and then it ends up wherever it ends up. And I've been very pleased with that to a certain degree, but I want to do more scripted content because there are things that I think I could say better in those situations, but I always worried that if I did more of those scripted videos, that it would take away from what I'm going to talk about in the live show. Well, now that all of the barriers have been removed, I can what the hell I want. I can reformat the live show into just being more of a talk show for its own sake and less of a here's the topic of the day kind of a thing. So we'll see. We'll see where that goes. But is it hard? Yeah. I mean, even when there's something you know what you want to talk about, how to do it.
Yeah.
An example I'll give is the Napalm Death Scum Figures review that I did a year or two ago. And I have such a reverence for that band, not so much of a reverence for the toy. I'm like, well, here's the thing. If I don't do this just right, I'm going to piss off fans of the band. I'm going to alienate people that want to hear about the toy. I have to find a way to cross these two things over with respect to everybody involved.
Yeah.
So I said, well, I can't do a retrospective on the entire career of the band. It has to really be focused on the time period that this toy is meant to commemorate. And I have to be able to get people that aren't grindcore fans up to speed on what that even is without assaulting them. Then talk about the toy line and what Super 7's done up to this point with that brand. And then finally get to the toy itself. And I felt like that's kind of almost a 3-act structure. And, the toy review itself is like 6 minutes. But the whole rest of the time I'm waxing about what the album is supposed to represent and how the toy completely missed that point. And I struggled with it. Like I had probably, I'm not even exaggerating, 5 or 6 different takes for each segment of that. I had to Frankenstein them together to get the tone right and get the pacing right to where every bit of information that needed to be in there and all of my points were made. And it still ended up being, even with all the pacing and tightening, it still ended up being a half hour. And it's something I'm proud of. But it was very difficult, even though I knew where I wanted to go. Yeah. Getting there was a real slog, to be sure.
Yeah. Well, it's, listen, you knew where you wanted to go and stuff like that. And it's commendable because these things, like I said loads of times before, it's not easy doing a channel. It's not easy doing content. It's not
No.
easy sitting down editing. You know, what could be like a 5-minute video could you spend like at least 2-3 hours editing it just to get that video right. So anybody who does a YouTube channel, in my opinion, deserves a pat on the back, because I think everybody wants to do a good job. I know there's a lot of content creators out there that like are doing the same thing, like toy reviews and stuff like that, but each and every person brings something different to the table. They all bring their own personality to the table.
Yes.
And that's what's so appealing about it, because everybody's got an opinion, everybody's got a different character and personality, and I just think it's great. And look, we're not going to see eye to eye with everybody all the time. I get that. But the thing is, just be respectful at the end of the day. Enjoy what we're doing. It is a hobby to the majority of us. I know people out there are making a lot of money on it and stuff like that, and fair play to them. But for myself, personally speaking, I just do this for the fun of it, and to get to speak to people like yourself, Jim.
And surely that's the point. I think that what a lot of people tend to miss when it comes to creating content is somewhere along the way they lose the authenticity. Some people like to throw the word integrity around, and I although I align myself with that, I think that to simplify that, it's authenticity. Because if you're always your authentic self, you by default will have integrity, right? If you never go back on your authentic self, you're going to be fine. And I think too many people attempt to create a persona or a mask of some sort for their on camera. So one example that I'll use is someone who often gets accused of this, and that's Pixel Dan. That's just Dan. I've known Dan for 4 years. That guy is just that guy. He really is that excited about stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I think I would argue that the same is true of Michael French and of Tony Roberts and many other people in the space. The ones that are trying to go in a specific tonal direction all the time. And unfortunately, this tends to be with what I would perceive as the more negative people out there that are always finding something wrong with whatever. You know, like my YouTube feed is often bombarded with, here's all the reasons that this movie franchise doesn't work, and here's all the reasons that this movie sucked. And it's like, okay, that's kind of it's easy to pick something apart, but you have to. I think the people that go after that sort of a thing and are known for that are successful with that. I know they're not always being authentic because that's just kind of what they're known for. So they have to kind of channel their thoughts into the certain viewpoint. Yeah. Whereas someone who's being authentic is going to have varied opinions based upon varied subjects. That's what being a whole human being is supposed to be. Absolutely. That's the human condition. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that above all else with creativity, whether you're the best editor or not, whether you're bringing a new type of content to the fore or not, if you're just authentic and you're consistently authentic, people will appreciate that. You may not make millions of dollars, but you are going to be able to look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day and have fun doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's I think that's the hardest part.
Personally, myself, I never set out to become a huge YouTuber to earn millions and millions of pounds a year. I'm a realist. I know that's not going to happen. I'm okay with that. It doesn't bother me. I'm just enjoying what I'm doing. Like I say, I get to speak to people all around the world, especially with this series and stuff like that. And, you know, there's other things that I do as well, which is, you know, like I say, it's just about enjoyment and stuff like that. So, yeah, I'm happy with how things are going at the moment. And another thing as well, I wouldn't say things just for the sake of controversy, just to get likes and subscriptions and stuff like that. Because, again, look, listen, I try to be honest as possible. I don't really do figure reviews. I'll do like an overview, so to speak. And I will say, look, okay, I like it. I don't like it. Here's the reasons why. As long as I've got a reason to back it up why I don't like it, or it's not as good as I thought it would have been. It's as simple as that. But yeah, anyway, I've got 2 questions left for you, mate. What does... Oh, hang on a minute. Let me get this right. What gives you that toy collecting buzz?
See, I know this question was coming, and I try not to front load anything, and I was trying to think about what that meant to me as far as like the way the question was asked. So like the toy buzz to me is like that excitement, right? Like you're trying to, like, for me, my entire collection, whether it be toys or anything else, but toys especially, it in some way or another is meant to be a snapshot of something that brought me joy, right?
Yeah.
So if everything on these shelves is meant to bring me joy in some way, then I think what brings me the buzz is realizing that about an item. Okay, so it's not just I got this thing. A lot of people talk about get it, you open it. Oh wow, I've got it. For me, it's not that. It's wow. Like being in the moment and understanding why I wanted that item in the first place. Okay. So a good example for me is I got the Studio 86 Ultra Magnus back there. I could have easily gotten the Voyager class War for Cybertron Ultra Magnus. He's very inexpensive and it's the right scale. And in robot mode, which is what I choose to display them in, he looks great. And it was one of those things where he's been in the shopping cart a bunch, and I almost picked him up like 17 times. Then I see this 86 Studio 86 version of it. I was like, fuck, I have to get this. And I pre-ordered it in more than one place. When it came into the pile of loot when Christmas was abound, and I'm like, nope, I got other things I got to worry about right now. So I let him pass. And I said, well, that one got away. I guess I'll get the War for Cybertron one. And then Nerdzoic, Godzilla bless him, got them in stock at a reasonable price. So I pulled the trigger. He arrived, and I was like, man. And it brought me right back to, like, it reminded me, like, it wasn't just that I needed an Ultra Magnus. I wanted this one.
Yeah.
Because he reminded me so much of that film and some of the key points of that movie. And it's not just the movie itself, but it's also remembering that my father took me to see that with my best friend at the time, someone who I haven't had contact with since he moved away. And so it's reminded of a good friend. It's a reminder of my father. I remember getting the soundtrack on cassette the day after Christmas, 1991. Not at that point, not even realizing that it existed, even though I had seen in the credits that it was out there. I'd never seen it anywhere.
Yeah.
And even in high school, 4 years after the fact, 5 years after the fact almost, I was elated to get that. And I was buying alongside it like Metallica and Pantera and stuff. But I was more excited for that tape than anything. So all those memories come flooding back anytime I get a Transformer that is representative of that film. So for me, the toy buzz is getting to relive the memories just by the virtue of touching this thing that reminds you of those things. Like that connection to good memories, not just childhood, but just good memories in general. That's the buzz for me.
Well, that's awesome, because listen, that question, it doesn't have to have a certain fixed answer. I've asked this question now. I mean, this is what, episode 73. So I've asked this question 73 times, and every time someone's given a different answer, it means different things to different people. Do you know what I mean? It would be boring if it's 73 times the same answer would be given every single time.
Oh, sure.
Do you know what I mean? So listen, that's absolutely fine, and that's how you interpret it, and that's what gives you the buzz. There's nothing wrong with that. That's absolutely
also
awesome.
Too, though, on a smaller level, anytime I walk in this room and turn the light on, and the first time of the day that I walk into this room, I always turn the light on and I walk over to the shelf and I touch at least one or two toys, just to be like, "Hey, how you doing?" Almost like you would a pet. Like for the first month that these mega colossal dinosaurs were on the floor, I would walk over and scratch their heads like they were animals, because I was so just cheesed to have them out and displayed. It feels a bit crazy, but it's like I'm enjoying it.
Well, that's the main thing. Look, listen, I would say if I come into this room and I looked at a toy and I didn't get any sort of emotion or enjoyment, like you say, what's the point of it being on your shelf?
Exactly.
Everything that we have displayed, or for me personally, as well as yourself in this room, I've got some kind of attachment to. There's a reason why it's in my collection. Otherwise, like you say, what's the point of buying it or displaying it?
Absolutely.
Last question.
Okay.
What does your collection mean to you?
The short answer would be everything, in as much as more than just the example I gave with Ultra Magnus. You know, some of these toys represent, you know, several year friendships, or remind me of someone who's no longer with us, or of a good time in my life, or just this collection is just a representation. It's like you get to walk into my brain for a second, and I love it because there's like a path. Because if you were to start in my kitchen, walk out of the kitchen to the living room, you walk along this, I guess it would be around 6 to 7 meters wide of just movies and video games to the ceiling. Okay.
Wow.
So you get all that, and then you come into this room with pictures and posters along the way. Then you come in here and you've got this big wall of CDs over here with Godzilla's on top. You see all this stuff. You learn something about me. And despite my outgoing nature, I sometimes have difficulty opening up to people in person. And the people that know me would say that's bullshit, but it is true. I find it hard to communicate directly. I often speak in metaphor sometimes. I'll liken it to a movie quote or something to try and find a common thing, because I feel like what I'm feeling is unique to me. And showing artwork and toys and sounds and visuals that I gravitate towards, I feel like it's an opportunity to bring people closer to me. And I think that's what my collection means. It's a means for me of reaching out to the world in a tangible way that maybe I don't understand how to do otherwise.
Okay, awesome. Again, I like what you say. Is like it reminds you of like certain times. It reminds you of friendships, community. And I know you touched on that earlier about the toy collecting community. Yeah, I just think it's absolutely awesome. And I have to say, it has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Unfortunately, that has come to the end of the chat. Just before you go, where can people find you on social media?
Well, if you search Grindhead Jim just in Google, you're going to find me. All my socials are at Grindhead Jim, whether it be Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. I'm on all of them. And with YouTube, it'll pop up in those early things. I have enough of a backlog on that channel. It's just easy to find. I encourage people to go into the back catalog and find a little bit of everything. Like even if it's something that you're not, because I have such a wide range of things I've talked about in the past, I encourage people to go back and say, like, I wonder what the big deal is about XYZ game or that movie or whatever. And if you like the stuff I do with toys, take a look at what I had to say about something else. And hopefully you'll get a bit of a chuckle out of it, or it'll make you think. And I hope to continue to do that as we keep creating content on the channel.
Absolutely awesome stuff. And what I'll do is I will leave the links to your social media platforms in the description below to this video. Listen, once again, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. It's been a long time coming. I know we've discussed this a good while back. And listen, in my opinion, definitely worth the wait. So it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
No, like I say, the pleasure's all mine, my friend. Yeah, it's been brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. For those of you who have stayed with us right to the very end, very much appreciated as always. Take care, stay safe, and we shall see you in the next video. Bye.
Cheers.
For now.